Section 7 of Something Childish and Other Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rob Marland. Something Childish and Other Stories by Katherine Mansfield. Ole Underwood. To Anne Estelle Rice. Down the windy hill stalked Ole Underwood. He carried a black umbrella in one hand, in the other a red and white spotted handkerchief knotted into a lump. He wore a black peaked cap like a pilot. Gold rings gleamed in his ears, and his little eyes snapped like two sparks. Like two sparks they glowed in the smoulder of his bearded face. On one side of the hill grew a forest of pines from the road right down to the sea. On the other side, short tufted grass and little bushes of white manuka flower. The pine trees roared like waves in their topmost branches. Their stems creaked like the timber of ships. In the windy air flew the white manuka flower. "Ach!" shouted Ole Underwood, shaking his umbrella at the wind bearing down upon him, beating him, half strangling him with his black cape. "Ach!" shouted the wind 100 times as loud, and filled his mouth and nostrils with dust. Something inside Ole Underwood's breast beat like a hammer. 1, 2, 1, 2, never stopping, never changing. He couldn't do anything. It wasn't loud. No, it didn't make a noise, only a thud. 1, 2, 1, 2. Like someone beating on an iron in a prison. Someone in a secret place. Bang, 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 trying to get free. Do what he would, fumble at his coat, throw his arms about, spit, swear, he couldn't stop the noise. Stop, 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 stop! Ole Underwood began to shuffle and run. Away below, the sea heaving against the stone walls, and the little town just out of its reach, close packed together, the better to face the grey water. And up on the other side of the hill, the prison with high red walls. Over all bulged the grey sky with black web-like clouds streaming. Ole Underwood slackened his pace as he neared the town, and when he came to the first house, he flourished his umbrella like a herald's staff, and threw out his chest, his head glancing quickly from right to left. They were ugly little houses leading into the town, built of wood, 2 windows and a door, a stumpy veranda and a green mat of grass before. Under one veranda, yellow hens huddled out of the wind. "Shoo!" shouted Ole Underwood, and laughed to see them fly, and laughed again at the woman who came to the door and shook a red, soapy fist at him. A little girl stood in another yard untwisting some rags from a clothesline. When she saw Ole Underwood, she let the clothes prop fall and rushed screaming to the door, beating it, screaming, "Mumma! Mumma!" That started the hammer in Ole Underwood's heart. "Mumma! Mumma!" He saw an old face with a trembling chin and grey hair nodding out of the window as they dragged him past. "Mumma! Mumma!" He looked up at the big red prison perched on the hill, and he pulled a face as if he wanted to cry. At the corner in front of the pub, some carts were pulled up, and some men sat in the porch of the pub drinking and talking. Ole Underwood wanted a drink. He slouched into the bar. It was half full of old and young men in big coats and top boots, with stock whips in their hands. Behind the counter a big girl with red hair pulled the beer handles and cheeked the men. Ole Underwood sneaked to one side like a cat. Nobody looked at him, only the men looked at each other. 1 or 2 of them nudged. The girl nodded and winked at the fellow she was serving. He took some money out of his knotted handkerchief and slipped it onto the counter. His hand shook. He didn't speak. The girl took no notice. She served everybody, went on with her talk, and then, as if by accident, shoved a mug towards him. A great big jar of red pinks stood on the bar counter. Ole Underwood stared at them as he drank and frowned at them. Red, 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 beat the hammer. It was very warm in the bar and quiet as a pond, except for the talk and the girl. She kept on laughing. That was what the men liked to see, for she threw back her head and her great breasts lifted and shook to her laughter. In one corner sat a stranger. He pointed at Ole Underwood. "Cracked," said one of the men. "When he was a young fellow, 30 years ago, a man here done in his woman, and he found out and killed her. Got 20 years in quod up on the hill. Came out cracked." "Who done her in?" asked the man. "Dunno. He dunno, nor nobody. He was a sailor till he married her. Cracked." The man spat and smeared the spittle on the floor, shrugging his shoulders. "He's harmless enough." Ole Underwood heard. He did not turn, but he shot out an old claw and crushed up the red pinks. "Oh, you old beast! Oh, you old swine!" screamed the girl, leaning across the counter and banging him with a tin jug. "Get out! Get out! Don't you never come here no more!" Somebody kicked him. He scuttled like a rat. He walked past the Chinaman's shops. The fruit and vegetables were all piled up against the windows. Bits of wooden cases, straw, and old newspapers were strewn over the pavement. A woman flounced out of a shop and slushed a pail of slops over his feet. He peered in at the windows at the Chinamen sitting in little groups on old barrels playing cards. They made him smile. He looked and looked, pressing his face against the glass and sniggering. They sat still with their long pigtails bound round their heads, and their faces yellow as lemons. Some of them had knives in their belts, and one old man sat by himself on the floor, plaiting his long crooked toes together. The Chinamen didn't mind Ole Underwood. When they saw him, they nodded. He went to the door of a shop and cautiously opened it. In rushed the wind with him, scattering the cards. "Ya, ya! Ya, ya!" screamed the Chinaman, and Ole Underwood rushed off, the hammer beating quick and hard. "Ya, ya!" He turned a corner out of sight. He thought he heard one of the Chinks after him, and he slipped into a timber yard. There he lay panting. Close by him, under another stack, there was a heap of yellow shavings. As he watched them, they moved, and a little grey cat unfolded herself and came out waving her tail. She trod delicately over to Ole Underwood and rubbed against his sleeve. The hammer in Ole Underwood's heart beat madly. It pounded up into his throat, and then it seemed to half stop and beat very, very faintly. Kit, Kit, Kit. That was what she used to call the little cat he brought her off the ship. Kit, 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 and stooped down with the saucer in her hands. "Ah, my God! My Lord!" Ole Underwood sat up and took the kitten in his arms and rocked to and fro, crushing it against his face. It was warm and soft, and it mewed faintly. He buried his eyes in its fur. My God! My Lord! He tucked the little cat in his coat and stole out of the woodyard and slouched down towards the wharves. As he came near the sea, Ole Underwood's nostrils expanded. The mad wind smelled of tar and ropes and slime and salt. He crossed the railway line, he crept behind the wharf sheds and along a little cinder path that threaded through a patch of rank fennel to some stone drain pipes carrying the sewage into the sea, and he stared up at the wharves and at the ships with flags flying, and suddenly the old lust swept over Ole Underwood. "I will, I will, I will," he muttered. He tore the little cat out of his coat and swung it by its tail and flung it out to the sewer opening. The hammer beat loud and strong. He tossed his head. He was young again. He walked onto the wharves, past the wool bales, past the loungers and the loafers to the extreme end of the wharves. The sea sucked against the wharf poles as though it drank something from the land. One ship was loading wool. He heard a crane rattle and the shriek of a whistle. So he came to the little ship lying by herself with a bit of a plank for a gangway, and no sign of anybody at all. Ole Underwood looked once back at the town, at the prison perched like a red bird, at the black webby clouds trailing. Then he went up the gangway and onto the slippery deck. He grinned and rolled in his walk, carrying high in his hand the red and white handkerchief. His ship! Mine! 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 Beat the hammer. There was a door latched open on the lee side, labelled "Stateroom." He peered in. A man lay sleeping on a bunk. His bunk. A great big man in a seaman's coat, with a long fair beard and hair on the red pillow, and looking down upon him from the wall there shone her picture, his woman's picture, smiling and smiling at the big sleeping man. 1912. End of section 7.